ださい。これはモトリー・クルーとのアリーナツアー決まって何かが作品として必要だっていうことで、作ることになった経緯はないんですか？
No, because the tour was already in place with the album, without the album. It's just we're always, the way the music industry is today, it's not the same as it was like when I met Masa in 1985 and 86, where people used to sell millions and millions of records in the kind of music we do. So when you put out something, whether it's a single or a video, it gives people something to talk about so they know that your band is still around, right? But there was no real pressure from them to put out the record for the tour. The tour was already in place. The record was just, it happened to coincide. And once I had the record in the can and the tour, I knew when the tour was going to be, then we kind of worked backwards, if you know what I mean, from there and said, well, listen, this tour starts July 17th, let's release the record of July 17th, and we'll release 3 singles before that, and then a single that day, if that makes sense.
今モトリー・クルーとのツアーの準備をしているところですけど、過去にモトリー・クルーと一緒にツアーしたことはありましたっけ？
Yes, in 1990 we did about 30 shows on the Dr. Feelgood tour, and that was right before the 5-man acoustic jam album came out, and actually we recorded what was to become the 5-man acoustic jam album while we were on tour with Motley Crue on a day off, because they would play like 3 days a week, and we were a young band. We were just finishing the Great Radio Controversy tour and getting ready to go into the studio to start working on what was to become the Psychotic Suffer album. So we couldn't afford to take 3 days off a week. So Peter mentioned Cliff Bernstein, said, well, why don't you play these, 5 or 6 acoustic shows, 1 a week, in this tour to offset the cost? And that was, again, an accident. That record, honestly, was never supposed to be a record or anything. It was such a fluke. Everyone says, oh, you started that. No, we didn't start anything. We didn't start acoustic or anything. We just happened to have the first live acoustic album by a rock band that was very successful. But it was during that Motley Crue tour, and they were great, and we've played with them a couple times since then, maybe 3 or 4 times at festivals. But this will be, the first time we're all back together in a long, long time.
今ちらっと話が出たけど、ファイブマンアコースティカルジャムって傑作アルバムで、テスラの魅力っていうのがより広く世の中に伝わった、傑作だったと思うんだけど、今振り返ってあのアルバムについてどう思いますか？
Oh, I love that record because I think it showcases the musicianship of Tesla. Obviously we come from a time period where people like to, I don't know how to put this, but almost make fun of the time period we came out of, being the 80s and the glam and call you hair bands and all that stuff. And that's okay. I don't care whatever they call us, but I think that record really showed that Tesla didn't need, costumes or pyrotechnics or even Marshall amplifiers to entertain a crowd and come across as a well-oiled machine, as a unit and a band, and that we could all play our instruments, and Jeffrey was a really good singer. So I'm very proud of that album.
80年代に登場した多くのバンドはどっかグラムっぽいところもあったと思うんだけれども、テスラはそういうバンドではなく本当に伝統的なスタイルを80年代90年代に貫いた非常に魅力的なバンドだったと思うんだけど、その辺のテスラの立ち位置みたいなものについてどう思ってますか？
Well, I think we fit in because we obviously came from that time period, right? One of the things that annoys me personally is when people call us a hair band or, in a condescending way. not in a good way where they're trying to take the piss out of you. Because I look at Tesla and then I look at like the Black Crowes or Guns N' Roses, and Tesla were more like those bands than the hair bands they try to say we were, right? We were more a blues-based working man, blue-collar working man rock band, more like a Bad Company or a Free or something in that sense, versus a Slade or a T-Rex or, you know, that kind of glam thing that new wave of glam or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking that or anything. It's just I think sometimes they mislabel and, you know, the category. Everyone has to put you in a category of or a box. Oh, well, they're this kind of band or that kind of band. We're just a rock band that wrote songs, hopefully, that people like for 40 years and that have stood the test of time. But the funny thing, you know, getting back to the five-man acoustic jam, is we've never done a five-man acoustic jam show in Japan, ever, or Tokyo, and we should. You know, we really should. I think it's the one thing when people think of Tesla, obviously they think of Mechanical Resonance and, you know, that first album because it came on the scene. But when they write whatever they write about the time period of music and the bands that came out, I think what they'll mention Tesla for is the acoustic, five-man acoustic jam. Well, they did this. That's our little sentence in the book, you know, if you know what I mean. So, but thank you, Masa. I appreciate the kind words.